I've been keeping my eye out.
All right, so I'll start now. And then we're going to do a loop and we're going to end back here. Yeah, so. The encounter that I hope to bring about through my artwork is one that begins to raise questions about a person's relationship to architectural surroundings, and perhaps to discover aspects that both person and surroundings have in common. My belief is that raising such questions can eventuate new surroundings, as well as a reconsideration of the importance of the relationship and how we position ourselves as part of the world. And this practice of architectural questioning begs the question, how does architecture ask? To say that it speaks to the body is to obfuscate through metaphor, as architecture affords the body effects changes in the body, through movement, through sensations and change. And this ongoing threshold of consciousness comes to our attention in moments when the coordination of our senses is disrupted. And one example of disruption is a situation of feeling lost. In the sprawling metropolis of Bangkok, years ago, the friend that I was living with helped me realize the benefits of being lost. She told me that when she first moved to Bangkok, she would take a random series of buses in the city until she was lost, and then try to find her way home. Oh, no lights on. There were lights on before. Okay, this is going to be tricky. So, yeah, now it's in the dark. Can you see?
No.
Okay.
There are lights on the steps if you want us to go down there.
I was going to go down.
To see those.
Yeah, sorry about this. This is a surprise for me too. Yeah? Okay, I was going to go down to the end so you can hold on to the wall. Okay. John D. Kane recounted to me that once when he got out of the subway in New York, thinking he was walking in the direction towards his destination, and realized after many steps that he was going in the opposite direction. At that moment of realization, he said it felt like the street turned back through itself, and this was paired with an internal physical feeling of turning through himself, though no motion took place. Instead, it was this feeling of reorientation, his coming online with the actual direction he was facing. Brian Masumi writes, "The alarmingly physical sense we feel when we realize we are lost is a bodily registering of the disjunction between the visual and the proprioceptive. Place arises from a dynamic of interference and accord between sense dimensions." This vertiginous experience of being somehow on unstable ground establishes a different kind of encounter, one that throws off track the continuing intentional flow of movement and action by introducing dissonance into the process of relating to the surroundings. This disorientation or destabilization instigates a more tentative way of relating to the surroundings. Being unsure of our direction, of what we have moved through and when, establishes a different kind of relating to our surroundings. And in this event, there exists the disjunction that Masumi describes between the visual. And this lack of accord creates uncertainty about our location, but also about how we relate to the environment. Dissonance. An architectural surrounding poses a question to the body, a question that can only be answered through a more effortful and conscious coordination. And this moment of disorientation offers an opportunity for developing a different relationship to the surroundings we're with, as well as a greater awareness of these mechanisms and their operations that are present in the event. Coming back to John Dee's feeling of both the street and his body turning through themselves in that moment of disorientation. This event, as one cannot continue in that same direction or with the same flow of directed intention. And so there are certain architectural situations or environments that can trigger this kind of puzzlement. transition from room to room has been shown in recent psychological experiments to lead to forgetting. That walking through doorways causes forgetting. This is believed to be caused by the spatial shifts affecting cognition that demands that a person update their understanding of the spatial environment they currently find themselves in. Adjusting to a new space causes a cognitive disruption, and so moving through multiple doorways has a statistically significant potential to disorient. As there are many situations in which an experience of disorientation or destabilization come about through sense failure would open up new potentials for action, the question must be held open long enough for recomposition to begin. And this act of holding is imperative here, and that it creates the possibility for engaging with a question that is posed. Remaining within the immediacy of such moments or events holds us back from rushing to a complete reoriented position or to a brushing away of tentativeness. It means to withhold, at least momentarily, from closing down on the sense of disorientation or somatic dissonance, and to be attentive to what potentials might be present. Or maybe it means simply to be attentive to what senses are happening experientially in that instance before fully coordinating the different sense dimensions into a coherent image of the world. This process of reorientation is important for us moving around in and participating in events, but also perhaps to be more tentative in our act of perception. To refrain from ending that process might offer a generative potential architectural step. In describing his own experience of Arakau and Gin's bioscleed house, John D. Kane writes, "The disruptions I experienced in biosleeve house were made more acute, resembling seasickness of a landlubber alongside the excitement of a flaneur in a self-organizing city. My struggle to identify the indicators responsible for my unbalance, dysmorphia, and lack of orientation hinted at the insufficient coordination I possessed for dealing with new learning conditions. Uncertain boundaries and inconsistent points of reference, alternative modes of measure and engagement. These disruptions affecting a disorientation and imbalance, and may be at first imprecise form of change. In John Dee's case, in finding alternative modes of measure and engagement. Arakau and Gin's write, questions that query the degree to which persons are surroundings bound need to be posed by actually erecting measuring frames around them. This begins to answer how architectural questions are posed. This sighted awareness hypothesis would have it that a person never be considered apart from her surroundings. It announces the indivisibility of seemingly separate fields of bioscleef, a person and an architectural surround. Such an indivisibility between body and surrounds leads to a potential for aspects included in an emergent architectural body. It's through this direct connection and immediate conveyance that questions can be posed directly to a body by architecture. As they write, the architectural surroundings themselves, by virtue of how they are formed, pose questions directly to the body. This idea that the body and surrounding architecture are coextensive can be off-putting, considering the material differences between human physiology and architectural. The work and writing of the minimalists, art object and architectural surrounding. White rectangular forms placed in gallery environments afforded a peculiar encounter. And a prominent art critic of the era, Michael Fried, found this work problematic because, as it was, in his opinion, theatrical in its bodily presence. An encounter with such work, which he called literalist instead of minimalist, was like an encounter with another person, way similar to an encounter with another person as a curious comparison. This similarity of relation. Marking the object as having qualities of personhood calls into question the difference between bodies that take part in this encounter. The otherness of the material position established through the expansive inclusion of the person and surroundings as part of the artwork. And so what the minimalists contribute through their artworks, which have the appearance of being very stable and independent, perhaps even cold forms, is that through an encounter with such forms, they call attention to our own sensibility to these relations between us and between the elements that surround us, such as sculptural objects and architecture. The similarity between formally and materially distinct bodies is an idea presented by Jane Bennett in her discussion of the thrill of an aesthetic experience of an artwork. She writes, "The thrill may also involve something like recognition. By this I mean an uncanny feeling of being in the presence of an aspect of oneself, a non or not quite human aspect that is nevertheless intrinsic to one's flesh and blood and bone. Taking part in the architectural and material consequences for our own bodies or persons and how they're defined and identified. Such an encounter can begin to call attention to a particular aspect of the relationship between body and architecture, and this common ground between person and thing, body and architecture, can draw out what they share, seeing a thing as such, and seeing a thing such as an architectural object or element in the way that a person might see another person could make an aspect of this relationship between body and architecture that goes otherwise unnoticed. So making this common ground apparent can make us, as Bennett writes, more sensitive to real forces that previously operated below the threshold of reflective attention. These architectures that we encounter in our everyday comings and goings, made of steel, concrete, wood, and glass, might be reconsidered as bodily presences, similar to our own bodies in the way that we encounter and engage with them. Perhaps it's this bodily interaction, a social dimension present in our engagements with built surroundings that allow for questions to be posed by architecture. Through moments of disorientation, sensorial dissonance, or feeling lost, an architectural invocation of embodied puzzlement offers a moment for critical reflection on our habitual ways of relating to our surroundings, holding open a door for us to redirect and recast this ongoing relationship. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect.
Beautifully.